The goal is to prevent additional GHG accumulation. We need to get to net zero and keep it there to prevent the worst effects of climate change. Businesses have one of the most important roles for society to reach net zero. It is the world's most powerful economic force. Business innovation and solution deployment is the first line of defense in preventing a crisis escalation. Environment doesn't just mean our natural environment, but also our communities whose livelihoods are interdependent on the entire ecosystem. This table shows the ripple effect that anthropogenic climate change has on businesses. Loss occurs through multiple avenues, most often thought of in terms of the destruction of the natural environment and increased extreme climate events, such as heat waves, flooding, and water scarcity. However, business loss also occurs through the impacts of climate change on society, from the health risks related to the heat wave exposures and reduced drinking water availability, to the direct infrastructure damage. The later it is for businesses to take action, the greater the risks and consequential impacts on business operations. As I know from my own experience, we are still at the stage of just convincing our business leaders and governments in Southeast Asia why they cannot keep waiting. There are really only 3 priorities to get your business to goal zero. First, cut emissions. Secondly, get more efficient. Thirdly, restoring nature and cleaning up our impacts that remain a risk to human health and the environment. Climate change is already having measurable socioeconomic impact as well as hitting businesses' bottom line. Extreme climate events result in significant disruption and negative socioeconomic impact. Businesses measure this by the extent to which stocks of capital are destroyed or disrupted, from physical assets to people and to nature. Events like heat waves, droughts, typhoons, flooding, depleted drinking water supply will become more frequent and more intense, leading to greater consequences. This drives at the backbone of our economic systems. Supply chain disruption due to climate change impacts is one of the main risks to businesses. The McKinsey Global Institute studied how supply chains can be weakened by our climate risks. These trade flows are worth over $20 trillion annually. Climate risks have increased the probability of the annual occurrence for disruption to these supply chains. It also increases the intensity of the disruption globally due to price volatilities, a lack of raw materials, and shifts in reliable supply and distribution. The COVID-19 pandemic is an example of the impact caused by disrupted global supply chains. With the increased exposure to climate risks, companies need to find ways to not just assess, but to actually mitigate these disruption risks to their supply chain. Here's an example of how the Kellogg Company, one of the world's largest food manufacturing businesses, have strengthened their supply chain resilience through climate risk mitigation. As a food production company, Kellogg's is highly dependent on their agricultural commodities as their main raw materials. The production of these raw materials is very sensitive to climate change as they are dependent on soil characteristics, weather patterns, water availability, and biodiversity. Agricultural supply chains are further disrupted by changes to the reliability of production and increasing food price volatilities. This leads to cascading socioeconomic impacts on farmer livelihoods. At COP21 in Paris, Kellogg's formally pledged to align their emission reductions with a below 2 degrees pathway. They became one of the first global companies to commit to a science-based target for Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Kellogg's identified 10 priority ingredients that together account for the majority of its supply chain. Kellogg's current operational structure was far too removed from farmers if they sought to create positive farm-level impacts. In response, Kellogg's redesigned policies and implemented engagement initiatives with direct suppliers on critical climate issues to find ways to work in partnership that would help farmers improve their agricultural practices through climate resilience. One such partnership was the launch of the Kellogg's Origins program, which provides farmers with support to adopt sustainable practices. This included training, improved market access, and critically, providing financing to deploy solutions. This program is now global, with nearly 300,000 farmers directly benefiting. Kellogg's aims to play a major role in building resilient, low-carbon value chains that will help promote food security and support the company's own sustainability growth for the future. Adaptation and mitigation will be necessary to manage the new risks due to climate change. As business leaders think about the implications, it is critical to build the capabilities to understand and quantify climate impacts and embed these impacts into all decision processes. Businesses need to invest in both adaptation and resilience in the near term, as these decisions directly influence potential losses and damages due to climate change in the coming decades. Businesses also need to act on the transition to net zero today in reducing emissions and working to mitigate continued warming, as outcomes are likely to be less severe in a world that transitions more quickly. Other than avoiding the worst effect of climate change, pursuing a net zero agenda also opens up various opportunities. The value to capture from transitioning to net zero is substantial. Businesses must apply a value lens to identify the opportunities that come from increasing investment in clean technologies, promoting economic development, job creation, and innovation while simultaneously fostering economic growth.